This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, this is Maureen Bogey.
And this is Dylan Hackworth.
And you are listening to the Creep Street Podcast. There it is. Come on. That was good. Sometimes you have to warm up your instrument. And by your instrument, I mean the human voice. And Dylan, you did a great job with that. God bless. Yeah. Thank you all so much for being here today. Oh my good golly gosh. Okay, we've got one hell of an episode for you. We're so excited. But of course, if you want to be kept up on what we're up to, feel free to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Creep Street Podcast. Twitter, we're at Creep Street Pod. Now, we also have a subgroup on our Facebook called Citizens of the Milky Way, a Creep Street fan page. It's just a place where anyone can communicate, post, do what you gotta do. Highly recommend that.
And they do. Boy, do they ever.
Oh, yeah, babe. Now, here's the thing. We understand that one episode a week is not enough.
It's not, and it's kind of a it's kind of a running joke.
It is.
If you think
really
it
is.
is.
No, in a way it is. And we're all kind of dealing with that and just kind of like going through what we can do just to get by. But thank God, Dylan and I have come up with something to fix that.
I absolutely think we have. What is it, Maureen?
It is over at patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast. Okay,
that's your medicine. That's your salve.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? You took the words right out of my mouth. I was also going to say salve. And I'm so excited about it. We've got great stuff. We've got movie reviews, movie commentaries, interviews, conversations, full bonus episodes. I mean, gosh darn it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got it all. So once again, you can check that out at patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast.
Yes.
Now, for those regular listeners out there, you might be getting a little bit of a tingle right now. A tingle in your fingers, a tingle in your toes.
Hey, maybe a tingle in your pants.
I'm not saying no.
Hey,
it could happen.
No judgment.
No, absolutely not. No, there's no judgment here. We only lift up. We only embrace here. And that tingling, wherever it may be, is because you know that it's almost time for our listener stories.
Yes, it is. And boy, oh boy, are we excited.
Oh, yes. Big time. We do it twice a year, once in the winter, once in the summer.
Oh.
And you know what? We're getting close to that time. So we need you to please send in your personal stories.
Yes.
Okay. We are talking about your small town true crime, your connection to an urban legend, a time you saw a ghost, a haunted house you've been to.
Whoa!
Any of these things, we want to hear about it.
Yes, we do.
Please, big time. So please, you can DM us on any of our socials, or you can email us at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com. And you will be, or your story will be, a part of our Listener Stories episode.
Absolutely. And of course, we will say your name
with
it.
Of course.
If unless you want to submit anonymously, that's okay too. But, yes, we will make sure your name rings out
Oh my God, yeah.
Through the town, through the alleyways and corridors of Creep Street.
Yeah, big time. I mean, we're all about the shout out here on the Creep Street podcast. So once again, please give us your personal spooky stories, any kind of Creep Streetish stories. You can send those to us on any of our socials or at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com.
Amen.
Now, last week, we really, if I may be so bold, we popped off.
Yes.
It was, I would consider it to be a good episode.
Oh, it was, I would say, and many of our listeners have said, one of our best.
And I really that's really nice. And I really appreciate it. I worked hard on that one.
Folks, that is all thanks to Momo.
No. It's all thanks to the squad. As I've always said, I've said it once, I'll say it again. The squad. The squad, the immediate squad, which is Dylan and Banshee and myself.
Right.
But then the squad as a whole is all of our Creep Street Homeowners Association members, and that's you all. And so anyway, so glad you enjoyed that episode. If you haven't listened to it yet and you like a little paranormal with your true crime, you're going to like it.
Absolutely. Well, also, it kind of surprised us, too. We didn't realize when you had started your research.
Oh, I didn't know.
You thought you were covering a simple haunting that kind of became this much wider thing. And I'm so glad you did with it what you did. You made a great episode.
Wow. Thank you. But you know what? This isn't the Maureen Bogey compliment hour.
Okay.
Maybe that'll be an episode one day, but
perhaps.
But not today. Dylan, what are we talking about today on the Creep Street podcast?
Oh, folks, we have got today, it's a story that blends the paranormal with a bit of good old-fashioned conspiracy.
Fuck, yeah. No, that feels good. I'm excited. We haven't really touched on the conspiracy world in a while, and it's time. It's overdue.
This is packed full of it. The first half is kind of the paranormal aspect. The second end, we're jumping into the whole conspiracy surrounding it.
Thank God.
Folks, today our episode is The Curse of Dudleytown.
Wow.
All right, now let me preheat your ovens with my sources here.
Okay, here we go.
First, a wonderful book that we have used for a number of episodes recently, Passing Strange, True Tales of New England Hauntings and Horrors by Joseph Citro. Cannot recommend this book enough.
Oh my God, we love it. So cool.
A video by the YouTube channel Mr. Ballin, a video called A Forest So Evil It's Illegal to Enter. And then I'll be doing some readings from the Cornwall Historical Society as well as the New England Historical Society. And you better believe they're the skeptics who are going to try and rain on our paranormal parade.
Yeah, I mean...
And it's where the conspiracy comes in, baby.
Here's the thing. They can both exist. You know, the true hard facts can exist along with the paranormal.
Well, let's give them something hard.
Let's give them something to talk about.
Let's do it. Let's give them something to talk about.
How about love? Who is that? It was goddamn Bonnie Raitt. Of course.
Bonnie Raitt.
Of course, it was Bonnie Raitt. We love the Queen. The Queen. I know I'm sounding like I'm being sarcastic, but I'm genuine. We love Bonnie Raitt here on the podcast. Anyway, this literally has nothing to do with the podcast. So
let's get started.
Yeah.
Today's episode is about a place that seems right out of a movie.
Okay.
An abandoned town in Northwest Conneticut that is truly illegal to go to.
Oh, okay.
Just keep in mind, actually, just for the sake of this, Dudleytown was never an actual town. It's actually, I think it's considered part of Cornwall, which is another town right there in Litchfield County. Dudleytown, it got its names from the residents there. It was this little area called Dudleytown. It was never an actual town in and of itself, just so we clarify that.
Okay.
The few ruins that remain are hidden within the forest and rolling mountains of the region. The valley in which it is located is called, no joke, Dark Entry Forest.
Okay.
Since the mid-1920s, the area has been owned by philanthropists and a shady land trust. And since the 1980s, no one has legally been allowed to enter the area. They claim it's because of vandalism, but many say it's due to far darker reasons, that the land itself is cursed and crawling with supernatural activity. And at the heart of all of it is an abandoned place called Dudleytown.
Okay, I'm interested. I'm excited. And it's insane that anyone would say that this whole vast area would be illegal to go to because of vandalism.
Right.
That's insane.
Just FYI, it actually is illegal.
Right.
So don't be going saying Creep Street told you to go.
We're not sending you.
We're not saying go because whether we agree with this shady land trust or not, it's illegal to go.
Yeah,
don't get in trouble. Don't blame Creep Street for getting in trouble.
Just go to Six Flags. Have a nice day. Don't, enjoy it. No, but I'm just saying there's no effing way that the actual reason why it's illegal to go to is because of vandalism.
Absolutely.
That's insane.
It's insane.
That makes no sense.
They also claim it's due to keeping the water source pure, but we'll get to that. We'll get to it.
All right.
So let's go back to the beginning.
It's a very good place to start.
The place that was once Dudleytown is a 2-mile square plateau in the southwestern part of Cornwall. According to my main source, Dudleytown died a slow and painful death, leaving behind only a few ruins that remain today. The place is now said to be crawling with legendary apparitions and evil entities. And while some may say that this place is the perfect definition of a ghost town, others would say a more proper title would be a demon town.
Woof, okay.
And it should be known that there are several theories as to what actually caused the demise of Dudleytown, but no one theory can fully explain its dark and bizarre history. Some blame it on natural reasons, saying that while the area is visually beautiful, it was too rocky and hard to farm, that it was too far from sustainable water sources and major highways, and that the mountainous terrain made it hard to travel in and out of. While others blame the economic booms that were happening in various places out west. And these new urban centers that drew people away from the area. We'll find out while this place was booming, a lot of stuff was happening out west. People were moving out west for promises of enrichment.
Oh, yeah.
But others say that blaming it on these things is merely just wishful thinking. That the reason for the town's demise is something far darker. That perhaps the land itself was cursed long before European settlers arrived in the area. But no matter what the cause, misfortune of all varieties has plagued the people who dared enter the area for centuries. It destroyed those brave enough to settle there and followed those wise enough to flee.
Yikes.
No matter what the cause was, this is where we get to dive into some fascinating history here. One interesting theory is that it's not so much the land that is cursed, but the name Dudley itself that has brought this misfortune.
I mean, he's a real son of a bitch in Harry Potter.
That is true. Well, it all started with an Englishman named Edmund Dudley, who was executed by King Henry VIII in 1509.
Oh, okay.
For stealing tax money from the royal treasury. Time passes, and it is now the reign of King Edward VI, the son of Henry VIII. The man who was executed by Henry VIII, Edmund, his son, John, is now the Duke of Northumberland, King Edward's chief minister. Well, John gets the gumption that he wants his family to take over the English crown.
Oh, yeah.
So he and his son Robert, who was serving as Earl of Leicester, come up with this idea of how they're going to do it. Keep in mind, there's a lot of names and titles here, and I'm trying to keep them all together, so I'm sorry if I accidentally mix them up or something, because, we're dealing with a lot of titles here.
A lot of titles, yeah.
But essentially, this was their plan. John and his second eldest son, Robert, came up with this idea that John's youngest son, so Robert's younger brother, Guilford Dudley, would marry King Edward's daughter, Lady Jane Grey.
Oh, no, I forgot about this. Yeah.
Well, this is what happened. Jane Grey, Lady Jane married Guilford Dudley.
That's right.
Once this was completed, they persuaded the impressionable King Edward, who was also at this time in the process of dying, that his crown should be passed to his daughter, Jane Grey, effectively cementing the Dudley family's ties to the throne.
Yeah.
Well, they actually pulled this off.
Okay.
But their victory lap didn't last long.
No.
You see, there's a reason that history knows Lady Jane as the, quote, 9-day queen.
Yeah.
She would only reign from July 10th of 1553 to July 19th of 1553. So while Jane is made queen, Mary the First is not happy about it, as this knocks her out of the line of succession. But as I said, their victory lap didn't last long. Within that 9-day period, their scheme is discovered. Mary the First swoops in, usurping Jane, and all parties were sentenced to death.
Yeah.
First John Dudley, and then 5 months later, both Jane and Guilford were beheaded.
You hate to see it.
Robert was actually pardoned for his participation, but was never free of suspicion the rest of his life. The name Dudley now had a bit of a stink on it.
Yeah, people were upset. This was a wild time for England.
Yes,
a wild time.
Absolutely. And obviously, as you know, I am condensing some very rich, fascinating history down just for the sake of our story.
I mean, yeah, we need to get stateside.
The Dudley name would suffer a further blow when Guilford's brother returned from France, not knowing he had been infected by the plague.
Oh, fuck.
Many say that from him, the plague spread and killed thousands of English citizens and actually hurt the empire by bringing about severe losses to military personnel.
Oh, God.
So this was obviously not the man's intention to infect his fellow citizens, but nevertheless, the name Dudley took another blow.
Yikes, you hate to hear that.
As the years went on, the stigma surrounding the Dudley name never wore off. Descendants of the Dudley family turned their gaze westward to the New World.
Okay.
As a place to perhaps start fresh and free themselves from the baggage they carried in England.
I mean, I get it.
In 1747, Abel, Barzillai, Gideon, and Aja Dudley all came to Connecticut and settled on some underdeveloped land near the town of Cornwall, Connecticut. And thus, this small portion of land, over time, became known as Dudleytown. It was still part of Cornwall. It wasn't its own separate thing. They just called it Dudleytown.
Yeah.
They supported themselves by hunting, logging, and raising buckwheat. Other families were to follow and settle in the area: the Joneses, the Carters, the Tanners, the Patterson families, among many others. And through hard work and determination, they were able to establish a nice little neighborhood there. Well, at first it seemed like Dudleytown was going to thrive and grow. Close by in the town of Salisbury, huge iron deposits were discovered, and the folks of Dudleytown jumped on the opportunity to provide coal for the furnaces. So economically, it seemed like this was great. And the lumber workers of Dudleytown had a near endless supply of pines, oaks, maples, chestnuts. I mean, it was you would have thought this was like ground zero of an economic hotspot.
Right. I mean, hell yeah.
And the young and upcoming town even produced some citizens of notoriety in its heyday. Mary Cheney would go on to marry known publisher and presidential candidate Horace Greeley. Selectman Deacon Thomas Porter would leave Dudleytown to become a Vermont Supreme Court judge, and his son Ebenezer would become the much-respected president of the Andover Seminary.
Very exciting stuff.
It seemed like it was all going to be champagne for Dudleytown, but that would soon end.
I had a feeling. I don't know where I got it from, but I thought that you might say that.
Abel Dudley, spelled A-B-I-E-L, like Abel, but I'm just going to say Abel. Sorry if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Abel Dudley, one of the founders of the town, would go mad sometime during his life. The once prosperous and well-respected man, due to his deteriorating mental health, blew his money away and became a town pauper. His mental condition was so bad, he had to be cared for by a custodian. Townspeople sort of took turns taking care of the once respected man until he died impoverished at the age of 90. Abel's brothers were also met by strange and gruesome fates, one of which was one day found absolutely cut to pieces. Immediately, locals were quick to place blame on the local native population, but as time went on, they would soon find that there were perhaps other reasons for his grim demise. In 1759, a man named Nathaniel Carter bought the house in the center of town that was once Abel's. Now, Carter's family would move to New York 4 years later, but right after they did, they were met by an awful fate. First, one of Nathaniel's children died of an illness. Then in October of 1764, while Nathaniel was away on business, his home was attacked by a group of natives. His wife Sarah and youngest son were murdered, and the house burned down, and they took Nathaniel's remaining 3 children with them. Now, Nathaniel was on his way back home, and had no idea what had happened to his family and his home. But before he would ever find out, Nathaniel himself was attacked by a group of natives, and according to my source, was brutally hacked to death.
Yikes.
He didn't even know what had happened to his family.
Oof.
Surprisingly, 2 of his daughters that had been kidnapped were actually rescued, but it said they had already gone mad, and apparently they remained that way until death. The only remaining members of Nathaniel's family still in Dudleytown were his brother Adoniram and his family. In 1774, he and his whole family were stricken by some unknown disease that killed all of them. Yet strangely, no one else in town was affected by this strange disease. It was just that family.
Oh, very weird.
From what I could understand from my source, there's about a 40-year period then where things kind of go back to normal. But then in 1813, another unexplainable disease comes to Dudleytown, and this one killed many of the residents there. Mary Cheney, who we mentioned earlier, who married the publisher and politician Horace Greeley, she hanged herself just a few days before Horace, her husband, lost his presidential bid in 1872. The despair of losing his wife and his political aspirations back-to-back was too much for Horace. His health quickly and shockingly deteriorated until his death on November 29, 1872, at which point it said he was stark raving mad. Another Dudleytown resident named Gershon Hollister was murdered in the home of William Tanner. Obviously, many were quick to blame William, even though he denied it, but it happened in his home. An investigation was launched into the murder, during which time it is said that William also went mad and began ranting about demons, ghosts, and monsters, saying that Hollister had been slain by some sort of supernatural beast.
Oh.
William lived as a madman until his death at the age of 104.
Wow.
Wow, indeed. I even wrote wow in my notes.
Okay.
Another local resident was the elderly General Herman Swift, a man who had actually been an advisor to George Washington and is said to have been a hero in the American Revolution. His wife died when she was tragically struck by lightning.
Oh, God.
After her death, it is said the general fell into a severe spiral of dementia. By now, pretty much every family associated with Dudleytown had met some kind of tragic fate. Compared to the surrounding areas, the death rate in Dudleytown was astronomical. Everyone had seemingly been driven mad and died. Locals, who had long wondered in private if there was something off about Dudleytown, were now talking openly about the place being cursed. And word spread in surrounding areas, and people who didn't even live in Dudleytown, but were somewhat close to it, moved away in fear. They didn't even want to be near Dudleytown.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
By the late 19th century, Dudleytown was all but abandoned, save for a single individual, a man who had immigrated over from Poland. He saw all the abandoned homes and unused farmland and found what he thought was an opportunity. So he moved into one of the homes, bringing with him some sheep for herding, but before long, the eeriness of the place is said to have driven the man mad before he himself fled Dudleytown.
Yeah.
The next victim of Dudleytown was a man named Patrick Brophy. Some sources say John Brophy. He was an Irish immigrant, they describe him as an Irish man. I don't know if that means he was born in the States but was just of Irish descent, or if he had immigrated. It would just say Irishman. I'm assuming that means he immigrated. I don't know.
We just know it's, an Irish guy.
Well, he loved the idea of having a whole town to himself. He was very public in his denial of the existence of such things as ghosts and monsters. He publicly boasted that he had no fear of such hogwash.
Oh no, this is not going to end well.
So in 1892, he moved in with his wife. There are 2 sons and a flock of sheep. And in almost immediate succession, his sheep died, his sons vanished without a trace, and his wife died of consumption.
Yeah.
Some sources say the sons got arrested for an attempted burglary, something like that, but my main source just says vanished without a trace.
Okay.
Despite all the tragedy that had befallen him, he was stubborn. And even when he was the last man standing, he refused to let the legend of the place defeat him. But Dudleytown wasn't finished with him yet. His house and everything he owned would soon burn down in a mysterious fire. About a week afterward, the citizens of Cornwall were shocked when Pat Brophy stumbled into town one day, apparently raving mad, shouting about giant cloven-hooved animals and terrifying green spirits that had chased him there. It's said that not long after, Brophy wandered into the woods and was never seen again.
Damn, just went into the woods. Wow.
Well, for a number of years, what was once Dudleytown remained vacant. But its most famous act of evil was yet to come. Just so folks are aware, some of my sources say the next thing happened at around 1920, others around 1906. But either way, which I know is like a 15-year gap, but hey, what you gonna do? A lot of this is legend passed down.
Yeah.
But either way, it was a beautiful summer day when Dr. William C. Clark and his wife Harriet happened to find themselves in the area of Dudleytown. Remember, the area itself is absolutely gorgeous. The couple lived full-time in New York City, and the purpose for their visit was they were looking for the perfect place to build their second home. Dr. Clark worked as an oncologist in New York City, and he was also a professor at the Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons there at Columbia University. The Clarks loved their life in NYC, but it was also New York City, baby.
Yeah.
It's very fast-paced. It's hectic.
You gotta get out of there sometimes.
Even back at the turn of the century.
Oh, yeah.
And, they were financially well off enough that they could afford a second home, one they could sneak off to from time to time for a little bit of peace.
Oh, yeah.
So the couple is traveling along these winding backcountry roads, and they're already swept up in the beauty and charm of the place. That's when they come across a red-covered bridge, and while they're making their way across this bridge, they happen to see a huge shady forest on one of the hillsides of these small mountains, and a little road that seemed to actually make its way up into the area. Obviously, the couple has no idea that Dudleytown was ever a thing, and honestly, it's most likely that the locals living in nearby towns didn't want to talk about it. In fact, it's said that many locals in Cornwall and elsewhere were kind of hoping that this young, affluent couple would settle where Dudleytown used to be, and that it might dispel any notion of a curse. So the couple make the turn off the main path and begin traveling up the road into the forest. Keep in mind, I think they're driving like an early car. This is turned so I'm not sure what model it would be, but it's like an early form of a car. And as they went, the road became very overgrown, and it was obvious not many people took this road that often, as it wasn't really cared for or maintained. In fact, the road got so rough for their early version of a car that they actually had to park it at the side of the road and continue farther on foot. As soon as the couple entered the forest, it's said it became almost like night, and the air became cool. But this is actually the real world explanation for this is because the canopy of trees here is so thick that not much light could get through. That's where the name dark entry comes from.
Right.
Now, one common thing folks would mention about the forest around Dudleytown was how eerily quiet it was.
Wow, yeah.
No animal sounds, no wind, just an eerie, unnatural silence. But as the Clarks entered the forest on this day, it suddenly seemed to have come alive with animal life and nature sounds. Birds chirped, bugs buzzed, and the wind rustled the leaves, which you might expect when you enter a forest. The farther they went, they noticed a field off to the side of the road that was packed with wild apple trees. Not like an orchard, but just wild apple trees.
That is weird. I mean, not weird, but cool.
And as they passed, they witnessed a deer standing on its hind legs, actually eating the fruit from the trees.
Oh.
I should mention, not in a scary way. It was just how a deer will actually hike up its two legs and get something from a tree. And they were so charmed by this place. The farther they went, the place just charmed the pants off of them.
Oh, yeah.
Just past the apple trees were sporadic bushes of roses and lilacs, just growing in the wild.
Wow.
Literally like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
They encountered beautiful babbling brooks flowing with crystal clear water. They could even hear fresh spring water coming down from the mountains. Then, when the sun would actually make it through the thick trees, it almost seemed to make the forest sparkle. Now, there's actually a reason for this that I didn't know. The forest in question sits on a hillside that's made of rock, and these rocks have a mineral in them called mica. And mica is a mineral that when hit by sunlight almost appears to shimmer. So it was like the place was glistening. It was just beautiful. And then there was the owls. The farther they went into the forest, the sound of the owls hooting became more and more pronounced. and it only added to the sense of enchantment about the place. To the Clarks, it almost felt like the owls were welcoming them to the forest. And dang it, that settled it. The Clarks were smitten with the area, and by the time they had turned back to go home, they were convinced that they had found the place to build their second home. After returning to New York, the couple filed the necessary paperwork to buy up a total of about 1,000 acres of land there on that forested hillside. Another thing to note here was that by now, the forest in question had become known as what I said, Dark Entry Forest, which I know, like I said, sounds super ominous, but it's related to the dark canopy of tree foliage that just kind of makes it a little darker in there. The only remnants still remaining of the original town were just some random stone walls and foundations from old houses, which had all been reclaimed by nature and overgrown. Once the paperwork was settled, Dr. Clark went to work finding builders in Connecticut that he could contract to build the new home. But no matter how much money the doctor offered, it was always turned down. But here's the thing. When Dr. Clark would ask why, he was never given a straight answer. Well, not to be discouraged, Dr. Clark decided he was just going to build the home himself. He was a handyman with plenty of funds, so why not? He had grown up on a farm in New Jersey and was quite capable when it came to manual labor and building things, so every weekend he would make the journey up from New York to Dark Entry Forest and work on building the place. He started by cutting down a big area of hemlock trees. On this, it was a flat patch of land. Then, using the lumber from those trees, he built a 2-story cabin. Nearby on a hilltop was a freshwater spring. From there, he laid piping from the spring to his cabin, giving the house a freshwater supply.
Wow.
Nearby also was a beautiful little brook with all sorts of fish swimming about inside of it. There, he was actually able to build a swimming pool on the mossy embankment right up against the brook. By Thanksgiving of that year, the cabin was finished, and the Clarks made their way to Dark Entry Forest to enjoy their new home and celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday. The place was an absolute paradise for them, and they would spend their summers there and holidays there. For many years, that was their routine. But while staying there in the summer of 1918, all of that abruptly changed.
I was worried you were going to say that.
The family was enjoying themselves at the cabin as usual when Dr. Clark received urgent news of a medical emergency back in New York to which his services were desperately needed. Harriet, his wife, was not happy at all about this, as she did not like the idea of staying alone in this remote forest cabin despite all of its beauty. She hadn't, in the years they had spent there, hadn't really spent any time there alone.
Yeah, I bet.
But as her husband was desperately needed, she begrudgingly agreed to let him go. It's said that she was very anxious now, and even as they drove to drop her husband off at the train station, she was very quiet, kind of lost in her worried thoughts. Her husband swore to her that he would return at the very first moment he was able to. He kissed his wife goodbye, and as the train pulled away from the station, it said that Harriet watched quietly as it disappeared in the distance, and even after it was long out of sight, she stood there, almost as if she didn't want to go back to the cabin.
Oh no.
Well, Dr. Clark was true to his word and was on a train back to his wife within only about 36 hours, so about a day and a half.
Okay.
The first sign that he got that something was wrong was when the train pulled into the station near Dark Entry Forest, and his wife Harriet wasn't there to greet him. And while Dr. Clark himself was not superstitious, something about this just felt wrong to him. She had been so terrified of being alone there, yet wasn't there to greet him when he said he was going to be there. Dr. Clark hastily took off on foot, making his way to the cabin. As soon as he got within the vicinity of the forest, he could hear these owls hooting loudly in the distance. But where once these hooting owls seemed like a welcome, they now struck him as a warning. Anxiety getting the better of him, Dr. Clark picked up his pace from a brisk walk to a jog. And as he's going through the forest, the sound of the owls are getting louder and louder. As he reached the clearing to where he could see his cabin, the owls were now deafening. But that wasn't all. Dr. Clark stopped dead in his tracks when he saw that the door of the cabin, rather than being closed and locked, was standing open. Dr. Clark takes off running, and getting to the door, he rushes inside. The moment he stepped foot inside, A loud, piercing sound once again made him stop in his tracks. It was coming from the second floor, and dread swept over him as he realized what it was he was hearing. It was the sound of wild, maniacal laughter. Fearing for his wife's well-being, the doctor charged up the stairs to the second floor. The sound was coming from their bedroom, the master bedroom. Throwing open the door, Dr. Clark found his wife, and once again his blood ran cold. She was on the ground, in the back corner, rolled up in a ball, her fist clenched tight. She stared directly into his eyes, her eyes wide and unblinking. But it was her mouth. Her mouth was gaping wide open, so wide it was impossible for a person to open their mouth that wide. It was unnatural.
Boy, it was so scary.
And from her mouth, seeming without her moving her mouth at all, her chest heaving, this maniacal laughter poured out, her unblinking eyes staring directly into his. In his terror, Dr. Clark turned and ran from the house like mad. What had happened to his wife those 36 hours while he was away? Now, accounts as to what actually happened to Harriet afterwards differ a bit. Some say she spent the rest of her life in a mental care facility. Others say she returned home to New York with Dr. Clark, where she then took her own life. But apparently, the only thing they were ever able to get out of her about what had happened were incoherent ramblings about strange creatures in the forest.
Strange creatures. Oh my God, that is horrifying.
Now, that kind of wraps up Dudleytown.
Yeah.
I want to hop over to a couple of pages on the Cornwall Historical Society website.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
And they claim to have some answers.
Yeah, they got the info.
First of all, this company that has owned this land since the 20s is called Dark Entry Forest Incorporated. I went online. I can't find anything about this corporation. I went to a website called opencorporate.com, I think was what it was called, and it named a few names of people who are supposedly on the board. But then when I looked those people up, I couldn't find them. A lot of them had pretty common names that when you look them up,
Right.
This wasn't one of the names, but say like Angela Carter.
Right, you're like, okay.
You know, you look up Angela Carter and there's dozens.
Right.
Could it be the Angela Carter, the doctor from Nebraska, or the blah,
Right.
blah, blah, you know, and there were some that were kind of in the area of Connecticut, Massachusetts, but who knows? I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, a lot of these names were pretty common names.
Yeah.
But here I will read directly from the Cornwall Historical Society, their entry for Dark Entry Forest Incorporated. And
Okay.
here it is.
Okay.
By 1920, Cornwall's population had declined to 834 people, from a peak of more than 2,000 in 1850. The low price and ready availability of Cornwall's real estate, as well as its close proximity to New York City, made it very appealing to New Yorkers who sought refuge from the hustle and bustle of city life. The work being done by the state in establishing public forests helped inspire the creation of private forest. In 1924, when Mohawk and Housatonic State Forests were being created, a group of New Yorkers acquired 800 acres of farmland on Bald Mountain in Cornwall with goals that included the promotion of forestation and conservation of nature. The group, formed by Dr. William Cogswell Clark, who purchased 300 acres of land in Cornwall in 1906, 10 years later, captivated by the beauty of the forest, Dr. Clark recruited Yale Forestry School graduate Edward Bear to work as his forester, planting several thousand red pine saplings in 1916. Dark Entry Forest was incorporated in December 1924 with 41 shareholders. The following April, they began planting 4,000 tree seedlings. By the summer of 1927, they had planted 10,000 seedlings, mostly red pine. In 1936, the red pine trees began to suffer from infestation of the pine shoot moth. The following summer, 2 bad brush fires destroyed numerous walnut seedlings. Norway pines were planted, replacing lost trees. Around 1940, the federal government donated Japanese chestnut trees and 100 hybrid poplars. A summer camp for boys and girls was started in the 1930s, including horseback riding and sports. Dr. Clark sometimes lectured to groups outside Dark Entry Forest. In 1935, he visited Camp Cross and spoke to the camp members about, quote, gaining the most out of living.
During the 1930s and early 40s, weekend residents, including the Skid Riverine Club from New York City. Dark Entry Forest Incorporated continues to the present day. Despite rumors to the contrary, the area is as populated as any other part of Cornwall.
Now, there's quotes and stuff, and it shows there's apparently pictures of Dr. Clark,
Okay.
like in the 30s and stuff, still on the land. Mm-hmm. So who knows?
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you much, but you know what it reminds me of? It makes me think of Bohemian Grove.
Yeah, I can kind of see that.
That place you're not allowed to enter because, like, they use
Yeah.
it for, the rich and wealthy use it for all sorts of weird shit.
Yeah.
Kind of
yeah.
getting those vibes.
Very weird. Yeah, I don't know. It's like interesting that it was like made into a park or like camps go there. I don't know, just very, very interesting.
Here's another little thing from the Cornwall Historical Society. I'm going to read to you a couple paragraphs here, and then I'm going to go over their myth versus reality, myth versus fact section.
Okay.
Every fall, as we get closer to Halloween, the Cornwall Historical Society receives an increased number of requests to visit Dudleytown. The answer is always no. Here's why. First of all, the Society does not have the right to grant permission. The area of Cornwall, popularly known as Dudleytown, is private property. It does not belong to the town, and it certainly does not belong to the Historical Society. Secondly, the people who live in Dudleytown are completely fed up with thrill-seeking, would-be ghost hunters. Imagine if someone wrote that your home was haunted, even though it wasn't, and you suddenly had total strangers wandering around your yard, peering in through your windows, setting fires, and leaving litter, invading your privacy on a regular basis. You wouldn't like it very much, and neither does anyone in Cornwall. But be forewarned that if you should, unfortunately, decide that your curiosity is more important than the privacy and property rights of Cornwall citizens, you will be arrested for trespassing. If you would like to visit the forested ruins of old buildings, or if you would like to visit a stunningly beautiful forest, Mohawk State Forest will satisfy your interests. Cunningham Tower is full of eerie ambience, if that's what you're looking for. If you would like to pursue the thrills and chills of possible supernatural encounters, book yourself a room at the Yankee Peddler Inn in nearby Torrington. Even before The Innkeepers was filmed there, it offered a spooky atmosphere for those who looked for it.
Seems a little like fucking dickish. First of all, I know there's a very good reason why they would want would-be ghost hunters to come to your town. The fucking tourist money.
Right.
Now, I get you don't want people littering and shit, but if you let people in, you're gonna make money.
More money coming into the town, all that stuff.
And I bet these people on private land probably enjoy their fucking money. So why not let some... I don't know, it rings really cucky and kind of rude to me, doesn't it? Like, it reads just that opening thing. It's like very smug.
I didn't really read it as smug. I read it more as just like, we don't want this, so just don't.
I read it as they're smug pricks. So here's myth versus fact.
Okay, here we go.
Dudleytown enthusiasts should note the following corrections and clarifications to Starr's history and a few of the more popular Dudleytown myths. Myth: the Dudleys of Cornwall were descended from cursed English royals. Fact: the Dudley family of Cornwall has no connection to English nobility. Myth: Horace Greeley's wife, Mary Cheney, grew up in Dudleytown and later committed suicide because of the Dudleytown curse. Mary Cheney Greeley never lived anywhere in Cornwall. She and the rest of the Cheneys lived in Litchfield. Myth: Abel Dudley was driven insane by the Dudleytown curse. Fact: Abel Dudley did not go insane. His neighbors described him as distracted and unable to care for himself beginning around 1756 or earlier. In their 1771 petition to the Connecticut General Assembly for reimbursement for taking care of him, Dudley's neighbors made no mention of anything unusual about him or his mental incapacities. They noted that he never had any wealth, only land that he did not cultivate. Most likely, Dudley suffered from a very ordinary form of senility. Myth: General Herman Swift was driven insane by the Dudleytown curse. General Herman Swift lived to be 81 years old. If, as Starr suggests, he suffered from dementia in his later years, natural causes seem far more likely than supernatural ones. Just to clarify real quick, when they're saying Starr, Edward C. Starr wrote a book in 1926 called History of Cornwall. And in it is where a lot of like the modern day legend comes from.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And they often say they don't know why he wrote such a hurtful,
It's so crazy that they like call it so hurtful and stuff. Well, I mean, I guess I kind of get it, but it's just I don't know. I just find it so weird that they like take it so like everyone's like so like upset. I don't know if it's like, can everyone just like calm down?
Myth. John Patrick Brophy's wife died under mysterious circumstances. Their children mysteriously vanished, and Brophy was driven insane by the curse. Fact. In the original version of the story, in Starr's History of Cornwall, an unnamed Irish laborer suffers a series of misfortunes. His wife died of consumption, a common cause of death in the 1800s. His sons left town after they were caught stealing, and his house burned down. None of these events can be attributed to the supernatural. In later retellings, the Irish laborer's name is sometimes John Brophy, sometimes Patrick, sometimes other Irish names. This, once again, it's like,
yeah.
Well, all those bad things did happen.
Right.
You're just saying it. Yeah. Okay. Sure. We can't.
Yeah. It's like you can't like hard and fast prove that was a paranormal experience or whatever. And it's like, I know. Like, what do you mean? Like, you dumbass.
Myth. A Polish immigrant named Joseph Matias was one of the last residents of Dudleytown and was driven insane by the curse. Fact. Starr referred to an unnamed Polish immigrant who, quote, failed to make good, lost his farm, and removed. No mention of insanity was included in the original story. A few retellings have assigned the name Joseph Matias to this man, while others have left him nameless, while embellishing the story with a surprising amount of detail, considering that his identity is unknown. It seems unlikely that Starr was referring to Matias, as he lived in Cornwall with his wife and children long after Starr's book was published, and he was Hungarian, not Polish. Myth. Dr. William C. Clark moved to Dudleytown and built a rustic cabin for himself and his wife. One day, Dr. Clark was called back to New York City for an emergency, leaving his wife alone in Dudleytown. When he returned, he found his wife had become completely insane and spent the rest of her life in an insane asylum. Fact. This is perhaps the strangest piece of misinformation in Starr's History of Cornwall, which relates to that of Dr. William Clark's wife slowly losing her mind before committing suicide, and that Dr. Clark left Cornwall forever. However, Dr. Clark continued to live in Cornwall, as do his descendants. The true story of Dr. Clark can be found in our History of Dark Entry Forest Incorporated, which I just read. We don't know why Starr chose to include a somewhat cruel and very fanciful story about the death of Dr. Clark's wife. Perhaps he chose to sacrifice truth for the sake of telling a romantic story that might help the sale of his book, or perhaps he simply didn't do enough research.
But they're also like sometimes saying like they didn't, like that was never mentioned in the book, and then sometimes they're like that was mentioned in the book and we can't trust the book. So it's like are we either trusting the book or are we not trusting the book? Like, I don't get it.
And here's the thing, this is a story that's been passed down for generations. I'm sure there's been things that have been added or embellished that aren't true. For sure, we're not saying that at all.
Yeah, for sure.
Couple more here. Myth. There are no birds or wildlife in Dark Entry Forest, Dudleytown. Fact, there are just as many birds singing in Dark Entry Forest as there are in any other forested area of Connecticut. In fact, Cornwall has one of the largest and most diverse populations of breeding birds anywhere in the country. Well, I didn't hear anything about there being no birds. In fact, all they talked about were the fucking owls.
Yeah, come on.
Okay, so that was their fact versus fiction.
It seems like it's a lot of just he said, she said on that bullshit, where it's like, just like with all of these stories, and that's okay, but these people are all fucking upset about it, where it's like, you just don't know exactly what really went down, because there's so many different stories, and everyone's heard something different, and it was so long ago, and there isn't a record of everything, so it's hard to know. So it's like, I don't really understand why they're like, that's a myth. And it's like, okay, well, first of all, cool it. Second of all, you don't know that, actually. So, hush.
Well, according to my main source, the last of the original houses in Dudleytown collapsed into the cellars by 1925, and since then, nature has reclaimed it. Well, of course, there are many questions. Was a curse really brought over from England? Was the land always cursed? But there's another explanation that my source puts forth, that perhaps this is what John Keel referred to as a window area. A place where the strange can pass in and out of our reality like a door, sort of like a Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh, yes.
Perhaps that's true. Just 30 minutes away, just about a 30-minute drive away from Cornwall in Dudleytown, is the town of Winstead, Connecticut, and they have their own weird shit going on. Local investigator Ted Thobin says Winstead itself is a window, which he describes as, quote, magnetic deviations in the terrain where these things slip through. And let me just read to you directly from my main source about a little something in Winstead.
Oh.
Yeah, this is directly from the source.
Here we go.
Well, back in February of 1967, a businessman and 2 companions saw some sort of object suspended in the sky. They watched it for a good 15 minutes before it flashed red and green and then vanished. In September of the same year, 2 14-year-old girls were home alone on a Friday night. At about 9 o'clock, one of them glanced out a second-story bedroom window and saw a bright light that just shouldn't have been there. Telling their story to the Hartford Courant, one said, quote, "It looked as big as a Volkswagen. It went through a red-white, red color changing sequence as it seemed to dance up and down in the sky. Thoroughly absorbed by the dancing light, their attention was snapped away by an odd noise coming from the barn 50 feet away. The girls agreed it sounded like a lawnmower engine trying to start. But who would be mowing a lawn at that time of night? When they peeked out, it wasn't a lawnmower that they saw. Instead, next to the mailbox in the yard, they saw 2 distinct figures, maybe 4 to 5 feet tall, moving in the darkness. What the figures were about to do by the mailbox may never be known, for just then a car came around a curve. As its light swept the area, the 2 figures, joined by a third, ran off into the thick brush behind the barn. At the same time, the light on the hill went out. About 20 minutes later, the girls and their neighbors saw a faint glow return to the hilltop, but very sensibly, no one went out to investigate. That same year, cone-shaped objects were spotted in the Winstead skies. Red and green lights hovering soundlessly over treetops became a familiar part of the landscape. In 1967, 13 girl campers and their leader were hiking up Blueberry Mountain outside of town. All at once, they were bothered by a high-pitched whine. Looking up, they clearly saw a silver, flat-bottomed, disc-shaped something about 25 feet wide. It had a red dome on top and seemed to be engulfed in a purplish mist. Shortly, it vanished. In 1977, 3 people accompanied by a policeman saw another red-topped object in the sky. It was hovering near the sewage treatment plant and seemed to be examining the ground with 2 beams of light. People also reported seeing similar objects diving into the local reservoir, then splashing out again. Of course, the first explanation of any peculiar light in the sky is flying saucers. But, Ted Thobin says, I don't believe they come from another planet. I think they exist at very different vibratory frequency rates so that we cannot see them most of the time. They inhabit the same space as we do, and places like Winstead are the exchange point between different dimensions. In other words, windows.
So that is a town just 30 minutes away.
Yeah, experiencing some weird shit.
So let's say the Cornwall Society is right. Maybe a lot of the Dudleytown legend isn't real, but something weird is going on in that portion of Connecticut.
Oh, yeah.
Is it a window? Is what these green spirits and hooved creatures, did they have to do with what's going on in Winstead?
I wonder. And it's also interesting. I don't know specifically about those places, specifically those places, but I know there was also a lot of, there were a lot of witch trials in Connecticut as well. And of course, a lot of that is just, people being scared. And a lot of that doesn't have anything to do with anything paranormal. But it makes you wonder. This area is just so interesting because it's such a beautiful, beautiful area.
Yes.
I don't know. I could totally see that there's maybe something to do with these, like a magnetic field that's changing something, or maybe it's another dimension, or I don't know. But things are coming through, it seems like.
They sure are.
And they're really affecting people. What do you think? Do you think something's really going on here? And what do you think?
I like the idea of a window. Now, here's the thing. I'm sure not all of this legend is real.
There's always, right.
I think weird shit has happened.
Yeah.
And like we always say, just because some parts of something aren't true doesn't mean it's all true. Just because, you know what I mean? We always say this, like say with UFOs or hauntings. Are there people out there that fake it? Of course.
Yeah.
Are there people out there that do witness something and truly think it's something paranormal or supernatural, but there's actually a reasonable explanation?
Big time.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
And are there people out there that see things that are legitimately weird and legitimately supernatural? Of course.
Yes. Yeah.
One thing doesn't make it all the same thing.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think it's probably the case with Dudleytown. Even if some of this legend isn't real, there's something weird going on in that area of Connecticut.
Big time. Something weird is going on. And Dylan, thank you so much for doing that fantastic research. putting together one hell of a damn episode. And wow, thank you. If you guys have any theories or thoughts or anything like that, feel free to let us know what you think. You can reach out to us at any of our socials, or you can email us at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com.
Well, I got a list of names I wouldn't mind starting a small rural community with. Sounds like a cult.
Yeah, but I would do it, yeah.
Folks, give it up for our top-tier Patreon subscribers. Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face Viet Lungfist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the oh-so-suave Sean Richardson, the British Bonebreaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Sir of Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, Lord Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Buren, the Arch Nemesis Aaron Bird, the Sadistic Sergio Castillo, the Rapscallion Ryan Crum, the Beast Benjamin Huang, the Devilish Chris Doucette, the Psycho Sam, the Electric Emily Zhang, the Renegade Corey Ramos, the Crazed Carlos, the Antagonist Andrew Park, the Monstrous Michaela Schur, the Witchy Wonder J.P. Weimer, the Freaky Ben Forsyth, and the Barbaric Andrew Barry.
Absolutely incredible. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much to our top tier Patreon subscribers. We love you so much. Couldn't do it without you. We love all of our Patreon subscribers, no matter the tier. Of course, we love you so much, and we love all of you, just for listening, just for being here with us, no matter what you do. We really appreciate it. Thank you for being here with us today. Please like, rate, subscribe, comment, leave that review.
Yes.
Share us on social media. Tell a friend about us. Tell a neighbor about us. Anything like that. It really helps spread the good word of the show. And once again, if you could please send us over those personal stories.
Yes, we can't wait. This is
the best.
We do this twice a year, and it's always some of our favorite episodes to do. We cannot wait.
So please send those over. If you've done this before and, we've talked about you in a previous episode, of a previous listener stories episode, and you think like, oh, I've already done one, I don't need to do another one, blah, blah, blah. No, send another.
Send it in.
Come on, we want to hear it. So once again, on any of our socials, you can DM us or you can email us at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.